things out. And when that goes red, there we are. Right, okay, I am live with Kai, who is, I believe, someone in the centre politically. We're going to have a little chat about politics and such, with a theming of American politics, I suppose, is the sort of leading we're going for. Kai, how are you today?
I'm good.
Fantastic. I know it's quite early in the morning for you over in the States, so we've just gone past middle of the day, but it's a bit less summery. We're having a bit of hot weather in Europe at the moment. I don't know if you've seen. We've got some fairly serious wildfires burning away through the continent, so we're in a
All
bit
right.
of a cooler day is not the worst thing in the world for us right now. But yeah, it's lovely to be here with you today, Kai. Tell us a bit about yourself. What's your where do you stand roughly? Is centrist an accurate label for you?
Centrist is a very accurate label. I have many opinions. Uh, Most are based on morale and genetic code more than like Christian Bibles or any other Bible.
Say
I'm
genetic
not
code.
really, yeah, genetic code. I'm a inventor and scientist. I studied that for a few years.
Okay.
Long. Yeah.
So like, I mean, they're very interesting. Science is obviously quite a broad topic, but very fascinating. But like,
Yeah.
so genetic code influences your morals and political opinions.
Um, so I support trans people with all my heart, but I wouldn't support a trans person playing in sports of the gender that they are identifying as, just because of the fact that if a man identifies as a woman, genetically we have certain compounds that make muscle gaining for men 2 times faster than women. So there is a broad category in which I feel like it should be iffy. I feel
I
like
mean,
if
I
we
must
were,
say, I wasn't expecting trans people to be brought up all of a sudden. As I understand it,
oh, right, sorry.
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's I mean, like I'm very glad that you support the identities of trans people, but I would argue that what you've just said there probably doesn't support them because that, in effect,
Yeah.
assigns permanent values to something that's not permanent. Like when you said a man that says they're a woman, like that isn't the case, right? Like the person's identity is their own to decide and to be like to be their existence is their own to realize, and ultimately especially in sport too, right? Like the whole point is that it's physical advantages over people, so if your body is like more suited to a certain sport, that's how it is. It's like if you're a swimmer and you're in the Olympics and then Michael Phelps is stood next to you, you can't say, oh, well, it's not fair because they've got a better body for it. Like, that's tough. That's how it is. So it's not as though it's oh, yes, this is unfair. It's just that's how it is sometimes. If someone's got a body that's more attuned to a certain sport, like, you got to sort of suck it in. You got to be better, right?
Yeah, actually, that's a pretty good point. I didn't really think about that one.
Because
Am I
that's sort of
sounding
the.
okay on
Go
your
ahead, sorry.
thing? Am I sounding okay over there?
Yeah, I've been going to have a chat here. Hello to
Okay.
Lasty and Queenages, but it sounds fun on my end. But
Okay.
yeah, keep going.
But yeah, that's honestly a really good point. I didn't think about that far. Um, in most cases, yeah, actually, I would agree with that part.
Right? Like,
Uh,
ultimately, if a person, it doesn't matter if you're trans or cis or whatever. If you're playing sport, the whole point is that you're trying to, use your body better than someone else, and you can't really complain if someone's better than you at it. You got to sort of just work harder, and it's not a rule as well, right? Like it's not as though it's like in basketball. It's not as though the best basketballer is just automatically the tallest one. Like there's people who are shorter than average, but that still are amongst the best players, like Steph Curry, for instance. So I always find it a bit silly when I sort of hear that, oh yes, there's some genetic advantage or whatever. Like, firstly, that's the point of sports, and secondly, work harder, be better. No one ever won anything by sitting around saying, well, it's not fair. Just rule out all these people and then I can win. Like that's not how you get better at anything.
Yeah, that's a good point, honestly. Yeah, that's just good.
Thank
Um,
you, Kai. But no, was there anything else you wanted to say on that?
I
Or before we go on to what we were going to start with, or did you want to say more about that?
No, I mean, other than that, I support trans people fully, and now I mean, yeah, I agree with that now as well. So I don't have anything to say there.
Okay, we'll move on. I'm glad you changed your opinion or reevaluated it. So the driving point of what why I've sort of put this together, right, is the centrism, the position that you've just given yourself, right? Like the idea that you've got lots of opinions, presumably some of a left leaning, some of a right leaning, and then through the average of that centre, I guess, is where you've put yourself. Would that be like an accurate summary?
Yeah.
Okay, and on the surface of it, like I can see that makes like immediate sense, right? Like the idea that you imagined like foods, like no one wants 100% just pure sugar poured into a cake. Equally, you want some sugar, otherwise it's going to taste bland and not very nice. So the happy medium between the two is where you put yourself, and a lot of people sort of feel the same way politically. But I think the difference is there's a weight, a value to certain things in politics and in society, which make certain positions much more favourable and healthy than certain quite bad positions. And so, in terms of left and right, and particularly in regards to current politics, the increase in the activities of ICE and the Trump administration, I think that this is an example of where actually being in the centre implies that there's some on both sides to sort of take from, whereas one side is incredibly far right and the other opinions, even if we don't think they're great, are nowhere near sort of in equilibrium to the far right, who are actively right now doing really terrible things. ICE is a particular interest here because the idea that there's some good, some bad sort of doesn't really fly when we're looking at essentially at this point an extrajudicial organization staffed by people with no training and no interest in anything but terrorizing people they perceive to be non-Americans, i.e. brown people and people who don't sound conventionally English as first language and such, at the expense of billions to the American population, which inevitably comes out of schools, healthcare, transport, all the other things that a society needs to function. And so my curiosity, I guess, my question to you is, what good are you seeing from ICE and from the right and Trump and stuff that leads you to put yourself in the centre and not further leftwards or further progressive?
Well, I am a leaning leftist centrist, is the full proper name, but the good that I see in ICE isn't what it is, but what it could be.
And what could that be?
When we look at ICE, we know their job is to deport people, right?
Yeah.
Or at least manage that typical area. Instead of deporting people, what if they were able to find people and help them get a proper green card? Or if they refuse to get a green card, then have a conversation about future options. And if that is deportation, then at least help them.
I
Obviously,
mean,
we do gain billions of dollars from active, what are they? Sorry, my brain isn't working fully yet. We do gain billions of dollars from people who are not here legally each year in the United States. So actively deporting them, obviously, that is terrible for both our economy and morality. The way they do it is also just disgusting.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we could manage them more freely, maybe just start over entirely with ice, because that carries a very heavy name. But in general, there may be something we could do with ice that could, instead of hurting people, just help them out.
Yeah. I mean, it's another one where I can see what you're saying. Um, it's definitely above the current process of what's happening and such, but it sort of doesn't hold the weight in our current timeline because of the nature of the organization, right? Like it's what you said about helping them get green cards. Like that would be a lovely idea on paper, but there's people already doing that who are also facing the wrath of ICE. Like how many ICE aren't just. It's easy to imagine ICE as purely raiding some underground den, and they've pulled someone out from hiding, and it's like, well, yeah, you're smuggling yourself into the country. You've got to get out. But
Yeah, I
in
know what
in
you
our
mean.
exactly right in reality, they're going for anyone, and they're going for people, not just anyone, but people who are actively undertaking those steps to get paperwork and to naturalize as a US citizen and stuff. They're getting people at courtrooms and at hearings and in courthouses and such because they aren't interested in the legal routes and all the sort of fancy jargon that conservatives have sort of been saying. Oh yes, you got to go the proper routes. They're intervening across those proper routes, and getting people anyway. Even sometimes, citizens, several times citizens, and with the force that you've sort of hinted at there, that leads to many, many deaths and lots of hardship. And I think that speaks to sort of the underlying theme of why you'd even need border enforcement from within the border. Like, the ethos behind it, the reason that ICE sort of exists, is because of the connection to racism, white supremacy, racial nativism. It's called. The idea that there's an inherent American quality that needs preserving amongst its populace, and that quality inherently ties back to whiteness or the European heritage or any other sort of gesture towards racial hierarchy that was core to a lot of the colonial powers founding and not founding colonial powers driving force in the Industrial Revolution and before that and such. And so that's why you see ICE overwhelmingly going after people they perceive to be of foreign quality. There's lots of undocumented immigrants from Canada and from European nations, but they don't get the same scrutiny as Hispanic populations in American cities like near the border, or cities in Democrat states with a heavy immigrant population, because they not only does this appeal well to the sort of person that supports ICE, someone with racist views that might be enamored by the idea of getting rid of the black people or whatever, getting rid of the non-white people, but it also is the ideology behind why they've hired so many more people. They're hiring people that want to carry out the campaign of violence against the foreign within America. So they hire people they don't train properly, give them a load of weapons and vehicles and such, and jurisdictional power even, sorry, and set them loose. And so I think that's why it's, I don't think, enough to say, oh, we just need to start again and help them, because the sort of people that are enamored by ICE and are funding ICE and critically support ICE to begin with, the administration that founded ICE, Bush administration, were also maybe not quite to the same extent as the openly fascist Trump administration, but also believed in that racial hierarchy and that element of nationalism, which led to what we're seeing today. That fundamentally is a poor and bad idea. And instead, we should be looking critically at society's, at wider concepts and think, okay, why is it we even need to have this happening? Why can't we just recognise that immigrants actually help the economy a lot and go beyond that? You go ahead. I've spoken for a little bit.
Yeah, that checks out. Honestly, I agree, but I honestly, if anything, I think more of INS was much better in my opinion than ICE.
Lasty agrees in the chat.
But oh, huh,
Yeah, I don't
cool.
know if you can see that. So I've got the chat and the video. I can pull up comments and such from. But yes, it's funny you say that because Lasty has makes exactly the same point. They already had. I mean, these weren't without problems as well, right? Like it's not as though this service was
Yeah.
ideal and paradise and such. But clearly, ICE represent a step above, a further step into the authoritarian and the police state and such.
Hmm.
Because as we were just sort of saying, someone, or rather, a group of people with the ideas of hierarchy and power and such, and wanting that dominance over others, have decided to increase the power of the state to persecute and attack its own citizens and people in its borders and such through institutions like ICE, which exists purely to maintain and cultivate this racial order, and also to make a lot of money for like defense contractors and people who the prison industrial the incarceration. I can't think what's the prisons and people who run prisons and such. If you run a detention center and all of a sudden ICE are given billions to round up thousands of people, you're making loads of money because you've now got a steady population of foreigners and illegal immigrants coming into your facilities to then require feeding, housing, processing, etc., which then earns you more money. Like it's all essentially just ways of making money over others at the through the expense of the marginalized populations targeted. And so critically, that is why the sort of from where I'm standing, the centrist position isn't viable here because the idea of ICE is fundamentally built on some really bad premises.
Yeah, it really is built on some very bad premises, and generally it's not very good at all, which I agree with you on most cases. I still feel like there's maybe, if not ICE, then maybe just abolish it entirely. Uh, but we might need something else. And that's INS still running?
Yeah, like ICE exists as an agency, alongside other existing sort of things. Like one of the issues is they have the power to act. If they've got the officers within ICE have received more powers to actually make arrests and such, which then you've got a lot of resources sort of is stacked into an apartment that doesn't really an area that doesn't need as much expenditure as say you schools, healthcare, and such, and like, even just like as you say, the steps to which a person might be a naturalized citizen. They don't put the effort into helping someone gain paperwork because it takes ages because they don't, they prize it quite tightly. When if they made it easier to do that, it would be a lot more beneficial for the said immigrant population and also the country in general. Underlying that though, I feel like because whilst I agree that in our current day and age, with no changes made whatsoever, there should be some form of there's some governmental body to help to oversee this stage of things. I do think that this isn't quite the right way of looking at it, like because the idea that there's some error or problem with people moving from one place to another isn't one that I agree with. Like an immigrant ultimately only exists because we decide there's borders on our planet. Like said nations aren't like inherent fixed things; they're just things we've made up ultimately. And so, whilst geographically something's happening, ultimately, if someone moves from I don't know, I'm trying to think of a Mexican city near the border. If you're going from Mexico to Texas, like it's not like you're stepping foot on Mars. Like it's not that different, really. Especially given that Texas was once part of Mexico anyway, right? So, oh, thank you, Lasty. ICE took the place of INS. I feel like that's correct. I feel like it's one of the. There's other administrations that I was thinking of. Then I couldn't. There's a lot of letters. I forget what all of them are sometimes. But you know what I mean. So to go back to what I was saying there, like the idea that there's some inherent quality that needs policing with immigrants, I think is a bit of a construction. Because ultimately, it's land. You're moving from one place to another, probably because you want to have a slightly better way of life. If America wasn't such a wealthy country as induced through years of geopolitics, which haven't been great all the time, people wouldn't probably move there as much because why do people move to Western nations more? Well, because that's where all the stuff is. Ultimately, that's where the better quality of life is most of the time. So if we address those systemic problems and the systemic issues, that would reduce the flow anyway, naturally, and not have it be some hot button controversy that dominates a lot of the news currently. Right?
Yeah, that's a good point. In all honesty, we do just make up these lines and borders that create the United States, Mexico, Canada, Brazil, all those places. They are all things that we just marked and claimed as our own land and territory. But we've been doing that since the ancient days at this point. I think a lot of people just see it as normal or uncommon to find a place that hasn't claimed their land as their own.
I mean, I feel like. Sorry, you go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I do see what you mean, though. In general, just it should be much easier, if not as simple as just coming in to live there. I do believe that for the fact of civilian safety, I guess, would be my case. We have to have some sort of verification of the person. Because we can't just let a national spy in or something like that. That would be our main worry.
But I mean, our national spy is really the sort of person that ICE is stopping. But like, is this like? It's not as though ICE are pulling up and be like, "Yeah, we've got you." Yeah, it's a secret KGB agent. We've unearthed this sleeper agent. Like, they're going after some guy that's been here for 20 years that just happens not to have, got the up-to-date paperwork. Their visa expired. The president decided that certain statuses don't count anymore, and so they have to re-update, and that's what ICE are waiting for them. I think that I don't agree that there has who is it for anyone to verify why you exist in a certain space, and it's not as though because you'd want to verify, say, the sort of person going into a nuclear power plant. The sort of person going into the floor of a hospital. You want to make sure that certain places in society are, you need to be here or you don't need to be here. But the entire United States of America, like that to me, the third largest country by land area, right? By space inside it, like that it's not as though that's like a exclusive club. Like, ultimately, it's something which is big enough to warrant sort of people moving freely. That's ultimately just what you should be able to do yourself. Like, you shouldn't be cordoned off from certain places just because someone says it's theirs and it's like it's like half a continent. So no, I don't agree that this is a threat to civilian safety. I would say that the issues to safety are actually found closer to home, right? Like the things which are abstracted, the privatization of things like food and housing and healthcare are far bigger safety issues. But because they aren't as visceral as a scare story about some scary immigrant coming over and doing some heinous act, like that doesn't get the same perception in society.
Yeah, I hate those.
Exactly, right? Like, it's easy to all the time. Oh, there's been a horrible crime, and look, the person's not born here; they're from another country, and somehow that therefore means we need to give ICE $1 billion or give Border Patrol $1 billion and let them, reign over everyone who's there. Like that doesn't compute because even firstly, when we see those actions, we should be looking sociologically at like why is it the resources aren't there for communities to help people that get distressed, and then secondly, like this doesn't, there's no inherent like quality that's innate within humans about immigrate, where you're from and such. Like it's not as though if aliens flew past the earth and scanned two human beings, they'd see some line of DNA that tells you they're from America, Britain, France, or whatever. Like it's all incidental. So it's silly when I see that, but that fear then transmits into what you said. You spoke about well, there's got to be some form of check because of civilian safety. Well, ultimately, there's something there that has been implanted a little bit. The cultural fear of the other, in this case, the immigrant, makes people think there needs to be this heightened presence at borders when for as much as you said a minute ago as well, that historically we've always had it, I don't think that's quite true. I think that certainly we had empires and stuff, but we're a young species, and we were also once just, primates. We were once just humans that had to come together and help each other, because if we didn't, we wouldn't have progressed as a species, but we're better off together. So if we're all able to find that attitude again and work together and realize that actually we're all human beings and can all work together, we'd be ditching a lot of the unnecessary prejudice and barriers to progress that borders currently represent.
Yeah. I believe if it was possible, then that would probably be the best course of action. Just seeing as the fact that the world could share their supplies as well throughout the world, it would get rid of famine and things like that in a majority of places. The fact that I would struggle is that the politics would follow up with that. With how
Yeah.
many of them just want war or like Jungkook, all that type of stuff, it gets harder to believe that is possible each year that goes by.
Well, I think firstly, like it's not as though. So firstly, just quickly, YouTube Gloop makes a very accurate point. My nation certainly would be in a bit of bother if we weren't importing tons of stuff. It's not as but we can't grow a lot of stuff in the UK compared to. Well, I say that we've got a temperate climate, but every nation relies on other nations for stuff. So the idea that people should be somehow like restricted from them is silly. Ultimately it's all a bit silly. But like you said, firstly, I think it's very nice that you share my and a lot of other people in the chat's probably vision of a united world working together and using resources. There's a word, I would say socialism would be that word for describe a system like that where everyone democratically works of the world coming together, helping and such. I think that is definitely the case that it would be, it's you're absolutely right that a lot of people politically would find it hard to do this and don't like the idea of sharing power. But that isn't, I don't think, an argument. That's a different argument to whether or not it's good or not, right? Like if we think politics gets them away, well, of course it will, because there's always politics in everything. So of course there's some barrier to progress that exists. We could say that for any sort of policy at any point, but these things are also influenced by current systems. Like, the reason there'd be maybe a struggle to implement global cohesion and cooperation is the same reason there's an issue with borders, because ultimately certain people in positions of power, with existing capital, with a benefit to the current world order, don't like the idea of sharing said power and having that control reduced and equaled out to others. And so if you can create imaginary tensions, if you can say, oh, well, people from this place of the world are actually bad and have bad ideas, and therefore we need to spend all our money on, ice raids and international police force and limiting who can go where, that then distracts from your wealth inequality, the fact that the billionaire exists while some people are in poverty, and gets people focused on what you said a minute ago, the imaginary safety from people from outside the border, the dangerous people from Mexico are coming. Like, you have a fake issue to implant on the mind, which I would say would be addressed at the same time with a step to the left away from where we're currently sort of seeing nations lurch more into nationalism. Step the other way, going back towards the left would be something to remedy this and then bring us closer towards that global cohesion, which is possible. As YouTube Glute says, there's no islands in global capitalism because the capitalists, and a lot of them, obviously they still have their nationalism and such, but they're interested in money, and so their trade they want as free as possible because you make more money when you can sell to a bigger audience.
Yeah, pretty accurate, honestly.
So then I would ask, where because you're agreeing with a lot of what I'm saying. We seem to be on the same page a bit, but I'm curious as to what is it like a question of realism? Do you think it's just not? Do you think it's just not viable, and so you're sort of sticking to the centre because it's like, something you feel is more achievable or more like tangible? Like I don't get what is like you're almost you seem to be on the same page with me in regards to pretty much all the stuff we're saying, but something is what's not
feel
clicking.
It's well beyond my years. Something that is possible, but neither of us will live to see. I feel the world is very young still, but if we do make steps towards those, then maybe it can happen eventually.
But even if we didn't see it in our lifetime, like that's still, our kids might, grandkids might, like just because we don't personally benefit doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Firstly, like if every step towards progress is a step towards progress, the next generation, even if it was 1,000,000 steps, if you take one of those steps, that's one fewer the next person has to take. So there's still, I think, a value in trying. And secondly, I don't think that it is necessarily impossible for us to see in our lifetimes. Like, I don't know I'm in my 20s. I don't think that the climate crisis is going to be something we can just solve if we haven't made serious changes to large parts of our political organisation and such. And so there's absolutely, and also change can be quite quick. You only got, imagine 200 years ago, us having the freedoms we do now and being able to sit on a web call and chat about things online. I think that it's very easy to think, oh well, this is always how it's been, so it's going to be like this forever. But things are the way they are because someone did them, and so equally more things can be done in the future to change and do new things.
That's a really good point. If we don't live to see it, then our children might.
Exactly. And here's Gleep again with that lovely icon saying, people died for weekends. There's people who fought really hard for even the things that we probably wouldn't even blink at now, right? Because that, you know, what was once profound and seen as such a massive titanic achievement, now it's just another day in the week, one of seven. So I think that you know, there's, whilst I understand the, like, oh yes, well, it's always going to be bad, like, we've got to yeah, we've got to have that things that, you know, there's, for as much as people say, oh yes, you're an idealist, well, ideals are good. You know, if we want to aim for ideals, then that's good. We want to be aiming for better. You know, it's just a case of keep continually pushing forward, and things will in time get better, and often quicker than we realise. But crucially, the centrism, I think, the other sort of, one of the other things I sort of find critical about it is that often it ends up dragging us, like it lends itself to negative. It pretends there's value in, you know, both opinions or both sides, when in many cases one of the sides is really not positive and needs to be, you know, binned off or stopped. Like, to use an analogy, if I say I want to put sugar in my cake and someone else says they want to put cement in it, like, one of those opinions is objectively bad, and it's the responsibility of people to recognise that. And I'm not saying it's a one-to-one translation. Like, obviously, there's some difference, but in regards to ICE being our sort of, or Trump being, you know, our sort of themes of the day, when there's a right wing which has just fallen completely into fascism, you know, where they don't care about any kind of proper process or justice, or even the notion that they're acting with the best intentions of the people, right? Like, they're just ICE staff for people who have had no training, that are killing people, that look for people with vaguely sounding foreign names, and send them off into disappear them off into a network of, you know, dozens of prisons. I think it's something like 200,000 people have been incarcerated since the start. Like, it might be more, to be honest, but you know, it's shocking. And so I think that the idea that we can still be talking about, like, oh yes, well, if they're just made to be a bit nicer, or if they're helping people out a bit more instead, like, no, there's fundamentally something broken with this organisation. And so to me, it has to be a firm no. You know, you got to say no, this has to stop, and that answer comes from a left wing position, right?
Yeah. That's that's pretty accurate, honestly.
Brilliant. So, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have a single argument, and don't get me wrong, I despise Donald Trump, but there's no buts. I just honestly hate him. I don't think there's a single good thing he's done, actually, so I don't even think if I really wanted to argue with him, I could. I don't, but I see
Yeah.
what you're saying in general, and I agree with it at this point. I don't think there's much left to be said on the borders or ICE. You have very strong points. You're very agreeable, and you see a lot of things that I did not even think of.
Oh, well, that's a very kind thing to say. Thank you. I mean, I'm glad that we've sort of got some consensus on that. Like, I suppose the thing then would be, because like I had some inclination that you weren't going to be like a big Trump supporting sort of MAGA person, right? Like, I was fairly convinced that it was. I would have been very surprised if you'd come out here and said, like, yes, I love how things are right now. But I guess the next step then, or where logically my brain would take myself, is that you've got someone like Trump who is, you know, he supports ICE, he's expanded ICE, he is openly corrupt. You know, as you've just said, right? There's no valuable positive thing that he's doing, but he was produced by a system that for a long time has resisted serious progressive change. You know, it's been several decades of neoliberal capitalism that have allowed wealth to accumulate for riches, for profit making, to be valued over public health and public good, for the country's nationalist tendencies to be allowed to take a front seat, hence the things like the Patriot Act and all of these right wing leanings and conservative leanings with borders and such. Like, this all suggests that there's a wider, beyond just Trump, but like a wider rejection of right wing politics and of conservatives that is needed to, to really sort of hammer home that things have to change. And I think especially exacerbated by, like I hinted at a minute ago, the climate change, the climate crisis, the ongoing ecological disaster that we need to address before it gets even worse than it is now.
Yeah. Hmm.
Right? Like,
I have no argument.
I'm very glad you agree. But then does that make you sort of, because like you said you're left leaning centrist, but like do you think maybe now's the time perhaps?
I think I'm more of a leftist now.
I mean, I'm very glad. Like, and that's not like to insult or anything. Like, it's not as though the criticism isn't, oh yes, these people are bad inherently. Like, there's nothing like that. But I think, as you've just said, the time almost is now to recognize. It's like when imagine, to use another analogy, like just steering a car and you have to keep it in a straight line. So sometimes you turn it left to stop it going right, and sometimes you turn it real right to stop it going left. But the car's now lurching well off to the right, like it's going properly, like careening off the road, and so now it's time to steer that wheel rapidly to the left, and to now think, okay, we need to really correct the course again so that we can get back to proper stable driving, and maybe also recognise that this measure of sort of having to constantly mediate the two is flawed. Time to take a leftward approach. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And so then I would then sort of say, well, how that looks is, again, mind reading going on in the chat. We sort of want to try and think, okay, when we have policies, when we have things which is like things to discuss and debate, rather than sort of thinking, oh, we've got to do something that's going to satisfy all the conservatives. We've got to sort of placate all the people who are a bit, afraid of change and such. We've got to actually say, no, we need to do something that works and that has a radical departure from what we've been doing for decades. That's going to look like, to think of it, even just a few mild ones: universal healthcare, funding for education and schools, an end to to institutions like ICE, things which are concretely going to actually change things, deliver fundamental, actual action, and crucially, then set in motion other progressive changes. Like a limit on the amount of money you can spend in an election, full-scale adoption of renewable energy, green energy, and such. Right?
Yeah, actually, I've always been a really big supporter of like universal healthcare and things like that in general, just seeing as it would help a lot of people. I myself am a very, very sick person.
You're what, sorry?
I'm a very sick person, as in ill.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that.
But we can't really afford that kind of medicine, so I've never really been planning on getting better. But universal healthcare is definitely something I feel like we should support, and along with everything else, as it would help the government and the world progress.
where it's a human right, right? Like it shouldn't be something that anyone has to pay for. It should be
Yeah.
like if we as a society have the tools, therefore let's make sure everyone gets what they need. And some people need it more than others, therefore they get the stuff they need. Like it's being said in the chat right now, it's something which exists. Like in my country, if I were to, when I stand up, fall over and break my arm, I can go to a hospital and have it sorted out, and I don't have to pay anything up front. It's not. There's no. I don't have to pay anything at all, really. There's no money that I'm expected to pay that doctor because I've got the universal right. We have the universal right to access treatment for what we have. That should be a global thing because we have a global world, and thus should be working together. But I think that we see this fear of this for the same reason that you had the fear of no borders or whatever, and so it's, I think, a case of unpacking that by connecting it to like the actual sort of tangible what right now the humans need to thrive and benefit, and decoupling that from the right wing assumptions which sort of lurk under the surface of a lot of these things. I have a question actually from the chat. YouTube group again says, may I ask if the guest feels any stigma towards being labelled leftist? Any resistance based just on the perception or the label?
Yeah, honestly, sort of. It's
And what would
more
you
of
describe that as?
where I live, leftist is considered it's a title of which you shouldn't be having.
Yeah, in quite a conservative area,
So,
right? Or like quite a...
yeah, if I walked around stating that I was a leftist here where I lived, it would kind of end up
Yeah.
pretty bad.
But I'd imagine. It's tricky, right? I think especially because even the word leftist sounds a little bit loaded going in. But I would say if I reckon the people you're around, even if they might have some like prejudice or some negative inclination towards that term, still probably wouldn't mind, like, probably get annoyed at things which we discussed here, right? Like, I'm sure the idea that they shouldn't have to be paying, rampant insurance premiums for their healthcare, or having to fork out thousands, per year for their like rent and stuff. Like, I'm sure there's still that frustration at things not being in place to help their lives be more affordable, right?
Yeah.
So then I would say that it's tricky, but there's almost like it's like you wouldn't like, it's terminology, right? Like, say you don't have to sort of lefty, like for one, lefty is better. Radical, maybe not radical, but like, just like there's other terms. I think that there's also an element of like there's always going to be pejoratives thrown at people that want things to be better, because it's like change is something which is easy to denigrate, right? Like, people get used to what they're familiar with and then find it hard to move on, and some people then turn that into, they project it onto others. They say, well, it's not my insecurity, it's you that needs to be like questioned for diverting from the norms. So in some respects, whilst I understand that it's tricky to, like, it's not saying you have to sort of wear a big shirt that says, yes, I am now left wing, I must, I am wanting change. Like, the ideas and the sort of things which connects to everyone's needs, but I think even if they don't want to admit that it's something they share with left wing enemies or whatever, like, things like being able to access basic human rights, not having to fork out thousands for basic properties when the military receives an extra billion to bomb Iran, or the White House gets a new ballroom because Trump wanted a nicer nicer place to live in. Like, I think there's a lot of common ground. I think which is easier certainly to discuss than like open. It's not as though you have to like hand someone a book, Karl Marx's works, and say yes, this is now your reading material. Like, I think there's a healthy, a subjective and situational way of going about it without having to put a target on your back, if that makes sense.
Yeah. According to this list I'm looking at right now, the only right wing thing I have left is I oppose anti-gun laws in the US.
That's an interesting one. That's an interesting one because I reckon that is. I think it's a more complicated conversation than like how it's been portrayed a lot of the time. I think that it's on the one hand, I grew up in the UK. I'm in the UK. We do not have a gun problem. I've never once thought to myself, "Oh yes, I'd be safer if people had guns." We've started doing like lockdown what's it called? Lockdown drills where
lockdown.
Yeah, but that's not for in case of a shooter as such. That's more like if, say, a unpermitted person was in the premises or like a wild animal. Like there's not the same. Yeah, but like it's not. It's like you get the kids ready for if there's a case where they need to be like not making a sound under the tables, a door shut and stuff. If there's something going on, but that doesn't happen very often in the UK. In part because that is not probably a stoat. We get some animals as well.
What's a stoat? Sorry, I am dumb.
A stoat is like a ferret. It's like a small rodent type thing. Like they're quite like a long animal. But I've got a stoat vase actually, a pot. This is what a stoat looks like that. But a hedgehog. No. So back to the point. Sorry. We don't have that same, nowhere near the same rate of death from firearms as America. A long way to continue. I think it's terrible in large part because lots of people see it as their inherent right, and therefore there's just tons of guns, unregulated. You don't even have to have a license or anything, and they're therefore easier for someone to go and shoot up a building in the States. However, whilst I think that public safety element is very important, and I would absolutely not want us to start going down the route that America's gone down, at the same time, I don't think it's firstly, I don't think it's a left-right thing as much, and I think that it's also, the element of like how said force is being used, I think, is often lost in it. Like, yeah. I think that if guns are a thing which exists on the market in the country or the region, that there is an element of actually, yes, a lot of people would benefit from, like marginalised people being able to defend themselves is quite important. If you live in a country where there are people that want you dead, as unfortunately many populations, LGBTQ, black people, disabled, even just against your workers or whatever, then yeah, I can see why you'd want to keep that. And I also think that it's you're regulating something, but then you're leaving it in the possession of the police, who are a far bigger killer of people in the States than a lot of the supposed other threats do, right? It's not as though there's a neutral body that's going to come and sort it out if things go wrong. You've got the police also containing large parts of white supremacists. The FBI found that there was infiltration from several far right groups before Trump promptly took the FBI off that case. There's fundamental institutional failures which mean you can't rely necessarily on the law and order sorting things out. Hence the protection that a gun might have. And additionally, even beyond that, I think it's one thing an urban area, say like a built-up urban area, is different to if you live in quite a rural place in the south where there's the threat of wild animals or whatever. Like as you know, as I think there's a lot of nuance with this conversation, which makes it, I think, not a left-right thing to loop back around. I don't think it's the case that if you support guns, you are right-wing, and if you don't, then you're left-wing. And I think that misconception comes a little bit because it's been Democrats and Republicans, and because they've polarized for that issue is quite polarized and politicized in the American sense. People then make the leap that, oh well, this is a left thing and this is a right thing. When I guess the other thing would be that the Democrats aren't necessarily a left-wing party; they're just to the left of the Republicans on a lot of things. And the Republicans have now become a far-right party, so they think that their interest isn't so much policy as it is like, how do I make as much money as possible for said billionaires? How do I put down the left and our enemies as much as possible? So it's not even really a position they've come to through, they want guns for themselves and they don't want guns for all their enemies. So it's not even like they've got a concrete position. It's just like whatever gets them the most power. So it's more complicated, I think, would be the TLDR version of what I just said.
That's in general.
So is that all
honestly,
your... sorry. What, sorry?
I agree with the gun defense. I feel like we could have a stricter law there, maybe that prohibits or ensures safety of other citizens to whatever, but yeah, honestly, that's about it.
But it's tricky, right? Because I've never had a gun pointed at me, right? So like I quite like, I hope that stays the same for the rest of my life personally. I would wager that if I were in America, that might be different. And certainly, I don't think I've ever actually been in close proximity to a proper firearm. I doubt that'd be the case if I were in the US right now. I think outside of airport security, like once, and there's some police in London that have the right, they carry firearms, but that's only by like like Downing Street and stuff, where the Prime Minister is, House of Parliament and such. But that isn't really, like, they're not conventional officers, and they certainly aren't members of the public when they're doing that. So, the fact that I think that influences a lot of people's perspective on guns, like from the outside looking in, even with my knowledge of all the stuff I've just said, I think that the UK is a much safer country, primarily because of, well, in large part because of that, but also because of many other things too. I think that's also missed is that the violence isn't just like the visceral gun, it's also the culture around it. The fact that America has all these fundamental problems at the moment exacerbates the anger and tension and violence. And when you combine that with like a lack of any sort of pastoral, how do we help people, and it's the fact that it's so individual. If you have a mental health problem, it's like you've got to pay to get help, otherwise you're on your own. And so because of that, a lot of people that end up doing atrocious acts, like if you look back at their life, had no intervention and terrible sort of conditions, which and also access to loads of far right material, which like actively encourages lone wolf action and wants people, doing these acts of violence so they can sow more seeds of hatred and stuff, right? Like, so there's a lot of reasons I think to consider for that.
Can you hear me?
But Kai, what? Sorry,
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, were you muted then? Just
Okay, sorry.
we
Yeah, it glitched out. I couldn't hear you for a sec.
Oh no, okay. Well, I was just saying, like, it's more nuanced. Like, there's lots of factors which should be considered beyond just the gun thing. But am I right then in thinking that you now have that was your last conventionally right wing thing which you sort of held firm to?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't have anything else other than a few neutrals, but
Why not go ahead, share those ones, because I think that it's a bit like it's always
Um,
interesting to discuss.
I don't think income inequality should be our top priority right now compared to what we're currently dealing with in the United States. I feel like we should be dealing with more of the Trump administration and the violence going around should be more of a concern compared to the income inequality.
I mean, why do you say that? Because well, I've got my opinion, but you go ahead. Why does that come to mind?
Don't get me wrong. I'm not a wealthy person. I'm far from it. But
Me
uh,
neither.
hold on, give me a second.
That's all right. I'll quickly look at the chat whilst there. I can't. Maybe a hedgehog. That's is we have we've got animals that would. I mean, there's not many, but like an animal break out of the zoo. A zoo animal might come and get you. Um, a wild dog. We've got lots of dog owners that aren't the most responsible, and so you have these animals which like out of control and stuff. Menacing foxes, no, they're a bit more dangerous than a fox. But no, I understand that we're not quite as wild as some countries, but there are plenty of animals that could cause a problem, even if you weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's more likely, isn't it? Drunken Englishmen. So dissatisfied citizen, a member of the kingdom and such, royal subject that's got upset. Sounds like you're back, Kai. Did you want to continue what you were saying? Sorry.
I have forgot what I was saying.
What was that? Sorry.
I have forgot what I was saying.
You forgot. You were. What were we saying? You were discussing, like income tax, income inequality. Sorry. You don't feel
Oh,
that is quite as pressing. Was there any particular? I think you said that like there's lots of violence and obviously Trump's administration, and you feel like they're sort of more priority, more of a priority.
yes. In general, I feel like once they're gone, then we should definitely take income inequality into account. But while they're in control, we are losing more lives that we could gain from the income inequality. I definitely feel like homelessness is a problem, and so is starvation and all of that. But maybe we should wait until the midterms that are in a month to deal with those.
I mean, yes and no. Like, 'cause I see what you're saying, right? Like, obviously, there are sort of more immediate, like, visceral, an obviously corrupt president that's a fascist, and several parts of the country being turned towards inflicting violence on various other people. Be it overseas with the army and the military campaign in Iran, or Israel and such, or be it in its own with own borders with ice and such. But I feel like it's all connected, right? Like because the income inequality and the wider sort of lack of access for working people and just the average person to things they need to survive is directly connected to Trump funding money into various corrupt causes and having the power to begin with, right? Like as if there were more equity seen, equality and justice in people's material needs, if everyone had access to stuff, Trump wouldn't be a billionaire because his family made their money, through various, extreme. Like his dad was a landlord, right? Like they owned property across New York, so that generates the inequality because you're pricing out people from housing unless they pay you, right? So that is what fuels then on a bigger scale the class divide, which lets Trump have this power and do heinous things. If people had access to a fair education, and libraries, and transportation, and recreational sports and stuff, their quality of life would go up. They'd have a happier time. But what wouldn't happen is I don't know, say like Amazon, say, or Verizon, or whatever other corporations you want to name, Walmart, they don't have the same profitability. You know, they're not able to take as much of a portion of the societal proceeds, and so it's in the interest of right-wing governments, especially far-right ones, fascist ones, to protect their capital and to expand their wealth and such by maintaining this inequality, which is done by taking it out of, austerity programs and defunding and military budgets and such, taking money away from the people and societal resources and putting it into policing, incarceration, the military, Trump's ballroom, crypto scams, just things which are set up to make their money essentially. Set up to pump into corners of society they can control and then use to reshape society, put more money into control. I would say that on the surface I can sort of see what you're saying, but no, I think it's all connected and it has to be. It's quite critical to address that material failing of conservative discourse, and capitalism really is a wider problem there. But the right-wing management of society produces huge income disparity and wealth inequality, which is one of the critical failings of our current predicament.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly.
Yeah, because if we didn't have such inequality, people would be able to afford stuff. Like, we'd be able to access the stuff we don't have. We wouldn't have to worry about half the stuff we do. Did you say you had another sort of neutral-ish position that centrally?
I'm starting to doubt it, honestly. I was kind of on government size is okay, but I feel like the government definitely. It's kind of a standpoint on, is the government big enough or small enough? But
I always I've always thought that you need the programs of austerity and cuts that the West has seen.
Oh no, as in right? Do they have enough control?
Like what, over what? Control over what?
Citizens.
What's your take on that? Like, where do you stand with that? Because I sort of think that
I say they have plenty of control.
Yeah, no, it's as in you're saying, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, what's the perspective here? Like, I'm sort of that.
The government does not need more control of its citizens.
Right. Okay. And whilst I would agree, I also think that question is a little bit of a loaded one. Like, it's one that you can define what is being controlled in different ways, because I would say that yes, there's plenty of overreach. Clearly being able to send ICE to your door is too much. Being able to revoke your citizenship is too much. All the other heinous stuff they want to do, too much. I would also say though that things like being able to discriminate against someone is an example where there should be the government stepping in. The worrying trend, horrifying trend really, of not having to get vaccinated, the anti-vax stuff that's going on, that needs to be reversed, because you need to be told to
absolutely.
you absolutely need to be vaccinated. Like, there shouldn't be even any doubt about that. But these are, a really good way of putting it. Government should always be working to increase agency for humans collectively and individually. So if you're governing, then there's places where you're going to step in more, there's places you should be stepping away from, and ultimately it's going to depend on where you are in society as to how much you're interacting with said government and what they're sort of saying to you. But equally, I feel like the better and healthier society gets, the less you would need that directive. Like, the reason the government has to tell, say, the water company not to put metals into their water and how to actually process it properly and such is because they want to make as much money as possible for the company, and so they have to be told to they have to be forced to avoid profit making and such. Like that is the reason for a lot of it. So I find it can be a bit sort of it's always good to specify which freedom is being spoken about, which is being relaxed and such.
Yeah.
But no, I feel like I'm thinking like we seem to be in quite a bit of agreement.
Yeah,
Like we
same
seem
here.
to
I'm
be.
like trying to think of something, literally anything, but I don't.
Well, no, there's no. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's quite nice actually, quite refreshing. I suppose then I would sort of to go back a little bit to what we were saying about steps forward and such. If we can agree that the steps that needs to be done are all sort of to the left, and we can also agree that Trump's bad here and now, and we've got to do something now about it. I guess I would challenge you to, whilst maybe obviously I don't want to compromise your physical safety and such, and I'm not having a hard time or anything, but maybe reevaluate your sort of centrism and sort of think, okay, well maybe we'll give progressive ideas, or having that sort of left leaning to left wing trajectory, I would say, because I think you'd be surprised as to how many people are fed up with the status quo and how sort of things are heading around the world. I think there's a lot of like in my country, for instance, we're having a drought currently. We've not had proper. I mean, today it rained a little bit, but we've not had the temperatures and the weather to maintain our water bodies. So, like, there's reservoirs and stuff drying up, even though we had the wettest start to the year that we've ever seen. But the technology is not being updated because of austerity. Like, they defund and privatise the water companies, so they don't bother to upgrade anything. So all this money we've got in the UK, but none of it is spent on stuff that actually makes the country function. People want change. People want things to function and work, so that they're not having to fork out all their money to pay for things that don't work properly. They want to be able to afford their housing and food and healthcare and such. Not healthcare in the UK, but what I mean. Like, they're trying to have a decent life, and right-wing ideas stand in the way of that. So I think you'd surprise yourself as to how many people are more palatable to a bit of positive actual change than maybe some right-wing folk like to let on.
Yeah. I definitely try that. I am not surrounded by any right wings necessarily. And it's not like anybody other than the people that I trust know that I even have this channel in the first place, nor do they really know about my beliefs. But I agree. Obviously, anyone who's in their right mind would want to be able to afford that kind of stuff and live in that kind of society.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so that's why I think they're perhaps more palatable to at least discussing and talking about, and having the conversations about the being able to put a name on the frustration. Not just sort of saying, "Oh, life's tough," and then sort of not saying anything about it. Like saying, actually, the conservative way of doing things. The idea that we can just sort of have a balance between conservative and liberal or whatever. That's not good enough. We've got to have something more progressive and more radical and more left wing ultimately if we want to see the things in our life that we struggle with get fixed and resolved. And so thus, time to turn left. But,
So I had to take my voice medicine.
yeah, no problem. I was going to say we've been going for an hour now or so, so I'll let the chat put some questions in before we go, and we'll sort of head to a conclusion of sorts. The chat, there's a couple of people very happy that you've seemed to be leaning a bit more left than you were perhaps at the start of this conversation. But I reckon, to be honest, I think a lot of people in the centre, have that have a similar position, right? Where it's like, you're wanting that social change, believe in quality of life and being decent to each other and such, but just have that sort of doubt about the actual term left wing, like because there's so much. Oh, you've got a logo there as well now. That's nice.
Huh?
That's a bit of
Oh,
pixel
did
art.
that just load in?
Yeah, was that live the whole time for you? No, I've it's been unless I'm very like oblivious. I don't think it's been there the whole time. But no, it's a nice little icon there. Um, but yeah, no, it's I think that like I said a minute ago, you'd be surprised as to how many people are really talking about essentially how bad things are right now and how we need to do something to change. Like we for an example, I'm quite a big football fan. I guess you would call it. I don't know if you're a sports person yourself or if you're into your sports, but
I
I
used
quite
to be
like.
a track runner.
You used to be what? Sorry.
A track runner.
Ooh, what distance did you do?
Um, the farthest I'm pretty sure was a mega marathon.
A mega man.
It
Wow,
took
that's
me
quite far then, huh?
it
Very
took me
nice.
about 30 minutes.
30. Wait, a mega marathon? Am I like? Do you know like how? Oh well, it sounds very interesting nonetheless. I'm getting my terms. Maybe it's a different term in America. Yeah, I
Um,
do a bit of long
it's
distance
about a
myself, but
26 mile.
well, that's a marathon. Yeah, 26 miles in foot. I think we're confusing terms here. Maybe we're getting our things mixed up. Regardless, sounds very good. What I was going to say was the football or soccer, as they call it in America. Um, there's a lot of talk of just ditching the organisation that is running it currently because of how like corrupt and bad and openly in collusion with Trump and other sort of fascist and authoritarian heads of state. And that would have been something which would feel like, unthinkable a few years ago, right? Like they're openly talking about seceding from FIFA, breaking up from the union. And so I think that you've got to keep that in mind when it comes to politics in general. Like what seems impossible and otherworldly yesterday is the news today. So I think that doesn't have to be despairing. That can be uplifting. We can say actually enough's enough. We want change to happen, and if we talk about it and keep talking about it and keep making those conversations, there's always room to push ourselves into a more left wing position or a left wing place in society. But no, it's been a pleasant conversation. Was there anything you wanted to say before we end the live part of the stream? End the live stream?
No. Oh, other
Okay.
than it actually took me an hour to a minute and a half.
An hour to oh there we go. Yeah, that probably
An hour and a
so
half.
hour and a
Yeah.
half to run how far? Sorry,
An hour and a half it took me to run 26 miles.
that's I think maybe it was and you ran this the marathon world record's like 2 hours or something. It's just under
No,
2 hours.
I was. There's no way it was 26 miles. I feel more like it was 16.
That's maybe that's probably what it was. So, not. I'm sure you're very athletic, but I was just thinking like I'm sure the marathon
I'm
world
not
record's a bit.
anymore, but
No, but my don't worry. My point was just that I thought I was thinking like the marathon world record like is he's beating that, but no, I'm sure like it was very good what he did, and yeah, athletics is fun. I do a bit of long distance myself actually, but not quite that long distance to be fair. Regardless, it's been nice chatting. I think definitely. Feel free to put your what was your channel name? I'll put that in the chat for anyone who wants to see
it
that.
was.
You sent it to me, didn't you? Where is it gone? Why can't I find anything? There we go. Right, I'll put that in the chat for anyone that wants to see it. There we go. Oh, you beat me to it. Look at that, too quick. Like your running days.
Yep.
If you want to, I don't think there's actually. You said it was a new channel, didn't you? So
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure you have to touch back, keep in touch or whatever, and we'll have to see what comes of that. What you get up to on there. But no, thanks for coming on, Kai. It was a lovely conversation. Thanks everyone for listening, and I don't know when the next one's going to be. I'll be very surprised if it is as pleasant as this one. But yeah, that'll end the live part of this one. Thanks everyone for listening, and take care all. And